by 45 to 50%. We're adding to the emissions by roughly 14%, so are deviating by 60%. So we need to do two things. The advanced economies and those countries that are responsible for the emissions, they need really to commit to the Paris Agreement to keep the 1.5 degrees alive by investments in decarbonization and being part of the Race to Zero is part of the campaign that we are supporting as champions. But at the same time, there is a great deal of work that is required in the adaptation front, to use the Paris Agreement language, or the resilience and the race to resilience kind of effort that could be required. The problem with that the business case for the adaptation is not as strong as it is in the mitigation. You'll be seeing the private sector very much engaged in infrastructure, new infrastructure for renewables, solar plants, wind farms, green hydrogen, clean green hydrogen as well. But at the same time, you'll not find the same enthusiasm because the business case is telling you that it is the public benefit that is much more realized than the business or the private benefit from that. So you would expect then that the public finance should really be providing the kind of funding, and you get, in many cases, public-private partnerships, especially if you are going to be dealing with issues related to water management, infrastructure resilience. You may have public-private partnerships. There are many ways to encourage the private sector to get engaged in the development of the projects, but so far the latest statistics available to us that it's less than $500 million of private sector contribution to investments related to resilience, while the bulk of the funding is going to the mitigation front. So what we can say here, get the public sector to do more in this area and leave the opportunities for the private sector to do more in the mitigation front until we find more of opportunities, like in the case of investments in the planting of mangrove, for instance, and other cases that could be scaled up. Well, I think somebody liked it, so with an echo there. Yeah, so I'll stop it here, and then I may be coming back in the way to do the finance and investments in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Raquel. How are businesses incorporating adaptation measures as part of their business models? How do you see the relationship between local communities and businesses in the region?
Once again, great question. So, you know, what we want to see with businesses is we want to see businesses do what businesses do best. We actually want them to make money. But we want them to make money in a way that ensures that they're playing the long game and not the short game. And I think that's the confusion. I think a lot of businesses are thinking, oh, well, climate action is a cost center. Climate action is a potential profit center. If you're doing it right, if you're taking advantage of the opportunities, you have the opportunity to make money. And within the region, especially in the Caribbean and Latin America, there are very few opportunities that we get to be globally on the forefront, right? And certainly in Africa as well. We're all, you know, somewhat on the back foot and developing. So when we see this transition that needs to take place, yes, it is a crisis by all means, but it is also this multi-trillion-dollar opportunity where new solutions will be created, new things will be implemented. We need to think about what is our chance to create the new solutions that will then become the solutions that everybody adopts. And that's the way that we need to think about this. And just talking about, you know, mitigation versus adaptation. When you look at how much climate finance has been spent, almost 80% in 2019 was on mitigation and not on adaptation, because you're seeing the cash flows in mitigation and you're like, okay, well, I can build a solar plant and I'll have my return. With adaptation, it's more sophisticated. But that's where the excitement is. That's where there's an opportunity to create a new model that can then become something that everybody else adopts. So for example, one of the things that we're seeing is in protecting land, so part of, conservation of land and conservation of ocean as a big part of how we transition. And the valuation of ecosystem services. So land just doing nothing, there is a value in that. And how do we value and sell that, not sell the land, but sell the ecosystem services to entities that are interested in helping to preserve nature? And so that's where we're seeing the private sector being somewhat interested in, okay, what could this look like for us? And how can we come up with new models of operating that can help to fund the transition, but also how do we take advantage of the business opportunity that this presents? Now, what am I seeing on the community level? On the community level, there is a bit of a disconnect, quite frankly, and we need to close that gap for sure. When it comes to things like agriculture, like coastal protection, like water security, everything, the communities understand what they need. And so we need to now get them engaged from the point of, we have an idea, we have a discussion, what are the things that you need, and then use that to develop the new solutions. So for example, in the mangrove rehabilitation and the potential to sell the blue carbon, it is the communities who are going out and planting the mangroves and checking on the trees and making sure no one is damaging them and understanding the value that that has to their community. And the more that we engage the community, we see, if we look at projects across the region and across the globe, where those kind of rehabilitation projects go well, it is where the community is actively involved. Where those projects go badly is where the communities are not actively involved. So I think if there are gaps for us to close, it is on how we look at finance, finding new innovations, how we look at adaptation, understanding that there are potential cash flows and it can't all be public funds. This has been going on for 200 years. We didn't create this problem and we cannot borrow our way out of it. So we have to be able to create new methods of solving this problem that presents an opportunity for us, either the small island developing states or the big ocean states or us, the underdogs, and then use that to get out front, use that to leapfrog from where we are to where we're going, and make sure that we are not just taking the community with us, that we are allowing the community to lead us in that transition.
Thank you very much. One final thought from both of you. We unfortunately could not start on time the event. All the events have been pushed a little bit on the time. It would be great to have one final thought to close this nice conversation. What is your thoughts regarding how can we scale and accelerate adaptation and resilience towards showcasing towards the COP and of course towards the next 20, 30, 50 years?
Right. We cannot really discuss the issues related to resilience and adaptation and ignore the fact that the world is facing multiple crises. A war in Europe, food security problems, problems related to energy and access to affordable energy. So we can't really take the opportunity of this kind of crisis and direct the climate action to provide some sort of solutions. So when it comes to food security, we started to see more interest in rewiring the supply chain, building better food systems, investing more in water management, in agriculture, and related infrastructure activities. And you'll find that as great part of the adaptation and the resilience investments required. Second, that we can really have the power of demand. The point mentioned about the share of adaptation to be less than 20% is the case around the developing economy share of funding, 20% or less in adaptation, 80% and more in mitigation. Again, here we see that the regional development banks and the World Bank could do a better job in reaching parity, at least, by having more share for adaptation and investments in resilience, and encourage leveraging the private sector in the adaptation front. The other thing is to bring private sector solutions through insurance in order to enhance the opportunities for more investments in the adaptation and resilience. The final part, which is one of the most controversial files in the discussions, is basically about loss and damage. That great part of the required funding should be directed to the loss and damage, which is the requirements, especially from small islands and developing economies, and the least developed economies in particular, that the loss and damage file needs to be discussed. It is not fair to borrow, even at concessional terms, in order to fix the damage that others had caused to you. It's like having someone, a neighbor, building a mansion or a palace, and you are required today to defend and protect your own house by borrowing in order to keep it maintained. It defies any kind of logic. It's really confusing from an economic perspective and, of course, from a moral perspective. So grants, investments, and fair share to adaptation, and definitely opening wide that discussion about loss and damage in order to get matters done properly is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mahmoud and Raquel?
Sure. I think there are two things that I would say are sort of final thoughts and that I would want you to leave here with. It is, one, understand that we are all individually empowered to take action. And so there's always a lot of controversy around, are we holding the oil companies accountable, and governments need to do this and somebody else needs to do that. And I think at the end of the day, we all have more power than we give ourselves credit for. So when you think about what needs to happen, don't scapegoat it and say, oh, well, the development banks or the government or CARICOM or whoever else it is. Understand what is your role in that influence. So for us, what I am focused on is finding new solutions within the region to empower the region to export solutions to the developed world. And I think we all have something like that. And if everybody took individual responsibility and said, what is my opportunity to influence this process and to create change, that we will all see more things happening and more things happening immediately. Nobody else is coming to save us. We are going to have to save ourselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's the breadth versus depth of how we talk about these things. There's so many of these solutions that we talk about as though they are easy. And I'm not saying that it is impossible, but it is incredibly complicated. So for example, if we're saying, okay, how do we, I was having a conversation the other day about, we talk a lot about like finance, and we need more climate finance. And at COP, you were hearing climate finance, climate finance, climate finance. No, we don't need more climate finance. There is no end of money chasing projects that have a commercial return. We need grants, and we need to be specific about what it is that we need. We need to be very, very clear every time we have a conversation. No, I appreciate, because all of the people with money are like, oh, but we have all of this money chasing all of these projects. And the project owners are saying, we can't get any money because we're talking about different things. And so how we talk about things and the depth with which we look at what is actually required needs to be very, very clear. And so I encourage you in when you're thinking, talking, negotiating about these things, that you add a depth and specificity to what it is that we require. And don't shy away from it. Don't be afraid of saying the word grant. But also don't ask for a grant for an energy project, because that doesn't make any sense. But so just have the depth in the conversation to be willing to be upfront about, this is what we need, this is how we need it, and this is what it's going to work, and this is why it needs to happen.
Thank you very much to both of you. I will invite now Gonzalo. We're very much running out of time. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud and Raquel.
Thank you.
Gonzalo is our past climate champion for COP25.
Thanks so much, Marcia, Dr. Mahmoud, Raquel. It was a brilliant conversation, setting the room for what we expect to be also a brilliant panel. And I, of course, highly personally appreciate your invitation to keep on trying to add value to the work that Mahmoud and Nigel are taking forward towards successful COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. What we will have now are two panels. The first one in Spanish, so every one of you that might require translation, please go and find your device. I understand that we have outside the room. And then the second one in English. So I will shift immediately to Spanish. And just thanks also, Mahmoud, for bringing the strength to resilience. This is so important, and it's very inspiring to hear how much you're putting your energy not only on your trajectory in finance. We both share our experience as farmers, but positioning resilience where it must be. It's becoming such an inspiring result of the work that you're doing. So thanks for that. Voy a invitar entonces primero a un panel sobre República Dominicana, que hablemos sobre lo que está ocurriendo y lo que debe ocurrir en este maravilloso país. Y para eso entonces voy a invitar primero a Simón Suárez de la Fundación del Grupo Punta Cana, que nos va a aportar una perspectiva del mundo de los negocios. Luego a Someira Zambrano de la Red Arrecifral Dominicana, con la perspectiva también de los actores locales. Y luego tres personas que van a ayudarnos también a tener un foco específico en agua. Juan Amel de Bepensa. Juan, bienvenido, qué bueno que obtuviste tu credencial. Tomás Hernández de La Cuava, también de la perspectiva local. Tomás, muchas gracias. Y finalmente Patricia Abreu del Fondo de Agua SD. Les pido un aplauso para nuestros 5 panelistas. Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Vamos a esperar hasta tenerlos a todos debidamente sentados. Perfecto. Bueno, Simón, quiero comenzar contigo. Tú, representando al sector turismo, nosotros sabemos, por supuesto, que el sector turismo está altamente impactado por la crisis climática en materia, por supuesto, de inundaciones, lo que afecta a las zonas costeras. ¿Cuáles son los beneficios de invertir en medidas de adaptación, por ejemplo, en la restauración de corales? Te entrego el micrófono.
Gracias. Buenas tardes. Y voy directo a la respuesta porque en verdad tenemos poco tiempo. Para nosotros, Grupo Punta Cana, para los hoteleros, hemos descubierto o nos hemos despertado a que nosotros dependemos absolutamente de unas costas saludables, porque creíamos que vendíamos habitaciones, creíamos que vendíamos camas y almuerzos y cenas, pero en realidad lo que vendemos es playa. Vendemos arena y vendemos experiencias en torno a la playa. Entonces, lo fundamental es que tenemos que asegurarnos de que esas playas mantengan bien. Nosotros en Grupo Punta Cana hicimos una valoración de establecer el valor de los servicios de los servicios ecológicos que nos aporta la playa. Y es importante que esa valoración, en el caso particular nuestro, pues dio un resultado como de aproximadamente $540,000 al año. Nosotros lo que sí no hemos logrado es ver cómo esa valoración se monetiza. más allá de de hacer lo que siempre hemos hecho. Entonces, el extraer la monetización de ese valor es algo que está pendiente de que utilicemos toda la creatividad del mundo para lograr. Eso es importante, yo creo que es un tema importante que debemos de abordar, pero bueno, esa es la cosa. Nosotros hemos invertido desde el año 2004 en nuestras costas por diferentes vías. Tenemos 6 kilómetros de coral, de arrecife de coral reconstruido, tratado artificialmente, y estamos permanentemente trabajando en eso.
Muchísimas gracias, Simón. Solo para el run of show, si queremos que no nos corten acá la cabeza, tratemos de mantener la respuesta en los 2 minutos y así alcanzar a dar 2 vueltas para cada uno. Someira, sabemos que construir resiliencia en materia de adaptación al cambio climático requiere este compromiso multiactor, ¿no? Un poco estábamos escuchando ahora la Red Punta Cana. ¿Cuáles son las mejores prácticas que tú puedes compartir con nosotros que justamente contribuyen a esa creación de alianzas con las comunidades?
Muchas gracias. En el caso particular de la Red Arrecifal Dominicana, que es una alianza público-privada donde convergen organizaciones e individuos que tienen un interés común por la conservación de los arrecifes de coral, pero que implementan sus acciones desde diferentes estrategias y enfoques, para nosotros una buena práctica para fomentar la integración de múltiples actores es mantener un enfoque holístico. Y para esto nosotros significa la preocupación y la acción por generar información científica de calidad que aporte a la toma de decisiones de las políticas públicas y a la generación de nuevas perspectivas o nuevas estrategias para el manejo de nuestros recursos. No solamente los recursos naturales, sino económicos y socioculturales. Y en este aspecto estamos involucrando lo que es la academia, que genera toda la información científica, a las organizaciones no gubernamentales que apoyan con el intercambio de experiencias y conocimientos, al Estado con la parte de las políticas públicas, a las empresas privadas y a las comunidades. Entonces, para nosotros es fundamental que dentro de esos proyectos de conservación se promuevan oportunidades económicas para que el sector privado pueda implementar acciones desde un enfoque más sostenible y que en este tipo de proyectos se permita el involucramiento de la comunidad y que puedan ellos tener oportunidades de desarrollo más armónicos con el medio ambiente y que esto los ayude a adaptarse a las nuevas condiciones del entorno, pero que también les aporte beneficios a sí mismos y a sus familias, porque esto incrementa al final la resiliencia. Otra forma brevemente en la cual nosotros fomentamos o creemos que es una buena práctica es que en la Red Arrecifal Dominicana promueve la comunicación entre sus miembros. Entonces nosotros facilitamos que todos nuestros miembros compartan sus planes operativos y sus resultados de proyectos anualmente, y esto ayuda a que haya un intercambio de experiencias, tanto las positivas para que se puedan replicar como las negativas para poder aprender de esas experiencias entre todos.
Buenísimo, muchas gracias. Se lo puedes pasar a Juan. Juan, para Coca-Cola, a través fundamentalmente del Fondo de Agua, el invertir en la protección de la naturaleza y fundamentalmente la restauración de fuentes de agua es una medida adaptativa absolutamente fundamental, ¿no? ¿Cuáles son los beneficios que ustedes están percibiendo de invertir en estas soluciones y de alguna manera cómo están percibiendo ese retorno de esta inversión en restauración de fuentes de agua?
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias. Primero que nada, en nombre de Bepensa Dominicana y la compañía Coca-Cola, muy contentos de estar con ustedes en este panel, en este importante evento. Industrias como la nuestra, el agua es vital, producimos bebidas y el uso tiene 2 vertientes. Las bebidas, pero también todos los procesos, la limpieza, los baños y todo eso, lo que genera 2 puntos muy interesantes. Uno, en los procesos internos conllevamos numerosos proyectos de reducción de uso de agua, que al cierre del 2021 ha logrado una reducción de un 25% del uso del agua que hacemos debido al uso de plantas de tratamiento de agua, también, no solamente las residuales industriales, sino también las residuales sanitarias, los cuales nos ayuda a mitigar el uso total de agua, porque esta agua se utiliza para lavar los camiones, para la limpieza de los patios, para la limpieza de los almacenes, etcétera, etcétera, etcétera. Ahora bien, hacia afuera tenemos un compromiso mundial, que es que nosotros debemos abastecer a la naturaleza el 100% del agua que utilizamos en nuestros productos. ¿Y cómo lo venimos realizando? Nosotros también estamos ejecutando un proyecto que se llama Agua por el Futuro, que inició en el año 2013 con el apoyo y la canalización de The Nature Conservancy. Y lo estamos ejecutando en 3 de las principales cuencas del país, del río Nizao, del río Jaina y del río Yaque del Norte, que tenía una meta original: reabastecer 550,000 metros cúbicos, trabajando en unas 558 hectáreas. Y al cierre del 2021, ese resultado ha sido un 140% de la expectativa, lo cual nos dice que las tareas que venimos realizando y el equilibrio que perseguimos en cuanto al uso de agua de los productos y la que podemos devolver a la naturaleza, da un retorno de continuidad de negocio, no solamente de perseguir un beneficio económico, una reducción de costos.
Muchas gracias, Juan. Tomás, me gustaría que nos comente cuál ha sido de alguna forma el rol que ha cumplido la comunidad y su conocimiento en la implementación de la iniciativa que usted lidera.
Sí, buenos días. Bien su palabra, su pregunta. Nosotros tenemos vastas experiencias sobre lo que ha sido la experiencia en el manejo de la siembra, de la protección del medio ambiente, tanto con la parte del proyecto Coca-Cola. También estamos trabajando a través de Fondo Agua, pues nuestras experiencias bastante amplias, ya que estamos fortaleciendo con la implementación de árboles perennes, árboles frutales. Específicamente estamos trabajando en el área de Aina. Ahí pues yo también soy un beneficiario, la cual me siento más que orgulloso, agradecido primeramente de Dios, de ese logro que hemos estado teniendo. Pero a través de ese logro que yo he podido tener, tanto en el cuidado tecnológico del medio ambiente, como también el cuidado y la proyección a que esos ríos puedan mantenerse lubricados de aguas, con una fuente que ahora mismo ustedes van a esa toma de agua, Aina Duane, y se van a encontrar que verdaderamente vale la pena sembrar, reforestar, cumplir con esa meta que es sembrar todos los canales, arroyos y arroyuelos y ríos que están en toda esa zona, la cual estamos agradecidos porque estamos fortaleciendo lo que es el medio ambiente, estamos contribuyendo con lo que es la parte ecológica del desarrollo de esa agua muy importante. Sabemos que aquí Santo Domingo, pues, esta comunidad de nosotros de Aina produce más del 30% del agua que es utilizada aquí en el Gran Santo Domingo. Pero también hay algo muy importante, que a través de todos esos recursos naturales, también tenemos lo que es el recurso que es del sustento de nuestra familia, ya que producimos divisa, producimos dinero para entonces poder sustentar nuestra familia, y necesitamos pues que se sigan proyectando esos proyectos en nuestras zonas, ya que es una zona, no está tan lejos, porque eso tal vez estaría a uno quizás 70 kilómetros, 60 y algo de aquí de Santo Domingo, pero la cual nosotros necesitamos seguir implementando, porque verdaderamente la gente ha creído en este desarrollo, la gente quiere seguir sembrando, la gente quiere dejar lo que es la explotación del medio ambiente, lo que antes se podía desarrollar en nuestra zona, en nuestros campos, que era algo que quizá ustedes no lo conocen, pero sí, el conuquismo, la quema, y ya eso totalmente allá no se hace. Estamos totalmente en lo que es la parte del desarrollo enfocado en la siembra de árboles perennes, Si es que nosotros estamos puntualmente en esa parte, para ese gran desarrollo.
Muchísimas gracias, Tomás, por traer también la fuerza de las raíces, ¿no? de la fuente. Patricia, el Fondo de Agua de Santo Domingo ha estado funcionando por ya más de 7 años. ¿Cuáles son esos principales resultados o conclusiones, las mejores prácticas y las oportunidades que han identificado desde esta alianza público-privada?
Bueno, buenas tardes y agradecida de poder compartir las experiencias del Fondo Agua Santo Domingo aquí con todos ustedes. Yo creo que más de elocuente que como lo dijo don Tomás sobre los beneficios que podemos percibir con este esquema, con esta filosofía de los fondos de agua, creo que no lo podría hacer, pero intentaré un poco darle algunos pincelados adicionales a lo que don Tomás comentó. Pues específicamente, como el esquema de la red Arrecifal, nosotros somos una alianza público-privada que apunta a la seguridad hídrica del Gran Santo Domingo, donde todos estamos aquí hoy, a través de la protección de 3 cuencas específicas, la del río Sama, la del río Jaina y la del río Nizao, que básicamente suplen todo el agua que nosotros aquí en esta ciudad consumimos. Y esto lo logramos a través de contribuciones voluntarias de capital, de grandes usuarios de agua, por ejemplo, en el caso de Bepensa y Coca-Cola, que están comprometidos con conservar esos ecosistemas productores de agua, porque al final están convencidos de que si no tienen agua, pues no van a ser rentables. Es buscar este punto de equilibrio. Pero esto lo hacemos precisamente no solo de manera improvisada, lo hacemos a través de el rigor científico y de soluciones basadas en ciencia y en naturaleza, pero con un involucramiento, como ustedes pudieron ver, de la comunidad enorme. Entonces hay varios beneficios. Está el impacto, obviamente, ambiental que se percibe cuando podemos hacer esa reforestación, esa cobertura boscosa que va a garantizar la producción de agua. Obviamente lo hacemos a través de no solamente de especies endémicas y nativas, sino también sistemas agroforestales, a eso se refería don Tomás. Y entonces ahí entra la segunda parte, los beneficios ambientales. La segunda son los beneficios sociales, porque ayudamos a mejorar la calidad de vida, estos ingresos que
their
perciben
quality of life, those incomes that the beneficiaries receive are giving them a better quality of life, reducing poverty. And third, are additional benefits that we're training, creating awareness to the citizenship. And Thomas mentioned that also because we're educating the communities and involving them, and then they turn into guardians of these initiatives. It's all done in an act of good faith because these owners of land are signing an agreement with the Tanzania Waterfront. And basically, they let us go into their land, let us show them that model and the learning. Thank you very much, Patricia. Unfortunately, we don't have time for the second round. So I ask for a round of applause for the great panelists here. And also, especially because they brought the importance of the resilience from the perspective of the economic activities that they're providing for the region, like tourism and working with the codes and the development of the multinational companies who work over here in the community and the public-private alliances that they can facilitate what's happening. So thank you very much, and I'll ask everybody just to just leave the room so that the next panel comes in. Thank you very much.
Now, a panel around the perspective of Latin America, around, of course, the race resilience and the importance of building resilience. Karen, thanks so much. Bem-vinda. Muito bom ter você aqui. Monica, thanks so much. Again, great to have you both here, and I hope that we can have a great conversation. I, again, encourage the two of you to try to use your minutes wisely in order for us to have the opportunity to go around at least twice. So I'll start with you, Monica. So building resilience infrastructure is absolutely critical to adapt to climate change. We all know that. Could you please tell us why a people-centered approach is critical to ensure resilience, and if you can tell us about how you see the network of construction, engineering, and architects incorporating adaptation and resilience measures. Yes, oh, there's another one here, please, I'm sorry.
No problem. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Muchas gracias. And I wanted to talk just a moment about what Build Change does, because I think it's important to frame this conversation. So at Build Change, we're in the business of resilient housing. So we transform the systems, policy, money, technology around the provision of resilient housing worldwide. And so far, we have done this for more than 100,000 homes and more than $2 billion in assets. And we do this because by 2030, 40% of the world is going to be living in vulnerable housing. Housing that is susceptible to loss and to damage, and lives that are in danger. So one of Build Change's fundamental beliefs is that homeowners have to be driving this resilience building process. Homeowners have to be driving the process to improve their houses. And they should do this for a number of reasons, but I'll highlight just a few today. So we know that when homeowners are leading the process of improving their homes, it drives economic development. So that's the first one, because homeowners engage local contractors, homeowners engage local engineers, and they buy from local supply shops because those are the markets that they know. And so it creates an economic opportunity to drive this local market and to expand that growth. Second, it's more sustainable because homeowners are more likely to reduce waste and reuse materials because there is the economic incentive to do so. So I'm so happy to be hearing so many of the speakers today talking about the economic opportunity for resilience, because that's really what it is. When homeowners are engaged, they want to reuse materials because it means that there's less investment from them, less money out of their pockets that will be used towards the upgrading process and the improvement process. And then third, and most importantly, it drives equity. So empowering those who may never have had a decision-making role, especially in climate action conversations, is critically important. So by engaging homeowners, they are driving the resilience building process, not only within their own communities, but within the four walls of their house. And so they are suddenly building the resilience that they deserve to have. So for the engineering community, we drive these outcomes and we empower them because they are going to be the ones using these buildings for generations to come. And so we are really excited to be a part of the Race to Resilience, and we lead the Climate Resilient Housing Initiative because we know that homeowners are going to be the beneficiaries of these projects, but we need not only NGOs, we need government support, we need private sector support, we need to bring all of these stakeholders together, because it's not just the engineering community, it's the entire market forces that are at play here.
Well, yeah, brilliant, Monica, definitely. We always say that we're now operating in a building environment that is not prepared for the climate that we'll be confronting in this old cycle. Somehow, we're probably confronting the same type of tension when it comes to food production, right? The systems, it's absolutely being challenged, and it's broken when it comes to foreseeing what will be the food system that we're facing ahead. So, Karen, what can food and agriculture business do to have a more people focus to resilience? And from your experience, has this approach helped you to be profitable?
Thank you, Gonzalo. Nice to be here on this panel. Thanks for the invitation. So yes, we're at Ambev. We're a beverage company, but now also focusing on digital platforms and offering a whole set of solutions for our vendors and for the small shops, pops and mom shops. And I would like to bring two of our targets. One is in terms of having 100% of our produce local, natural, and inclusive. So think of that in one of the biggest beverage companies in the world. And the other one is talking about 100% of our producers connected, trained, and financially empowered to do whatever they want to do. And so we do have some gains from working with locally produced cultures, because you have the people's knowledge, you have their cultural values connected. It brings them a sense of pride and belonging. We use produce that people know how to use, and we use produce that are local and they are more climate resilient because you don't need as much pesticide or any kind of inputs into the production, and this is more sustainable in the long way. So believe us, we're doing our best to produce increasingly drinks and beverages that are more natural with less alcohol intake, with local products and other fruits, you know, guarana and other products we use. And this is also good for resilience in demand because we're bringing innovation to people. They want to taste new things and they connect to the values of the brand because this is something that it's the only place you can buy it, or it's the only, you know, the product you have only in this specific region. So this brings some extra value. And of course, these gains are per pass because we are a beverage industry that has, you know, beer and some juices and sodas, and they're mainly made from natural products. And this is being valued by consumers. So we're taking a very deep look into that. And in terms of development and gains, we're talking about imagine connecting 3,000 farmers together and having them online on an app and giving some information. We now have some projects on carbon accounting for soil. We don't have in Brazil for many, many cultures. And this is something that we're creating knowledge together and bringing capacity building back to the communities. Yes, so...
In how many countries is it operating outside of Brazil? In other countries, are you operating with the same app? And
Yeah, 7 countries in the region.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Karen. So back to you, Monica. How has Build Change contributed to bettering the building sector supply chain in some of your projects?
Thanks, Gonzalo. So I want to emphasize that, and I think it's been said a couple of times today, that building resilience is good business. So good business to, you know, protect existing assets in our case and also drive growth. So we advocate for improving existing housing. We don't just do new construction, we also do upgrading of existing housing. Not just because we know that people love where they live and, you know, they have emotional attachment to their houses, but also because it is cost efficient. We found on average, a study that we published earlier this year noted that on average, it is about 23% of the cost to upgrade a house as it is to build a new construction in the same location. So think about that in terms of how we can be using our resources to maximize the number of people that we're able to reach. So I only have a couple minutes, so I'll give just one case study of how this might be working in Haiti. So after the 2010 earthquake, we worked with a number of building material suppliers, and we created this network called Réseau. And Réseau contributed to improving the quality of informal housing through block production, through material suppliers. And after a short while, some of the impacts that we found from this was 25% growth of the companies and 200 new jobs, a 60% increase in affiliate sales. So that's over 12 million good quality blocks sold and enough to build 22,000 safer houses. So if we're investing in resilience, there are resilience dividends from an economic standpoint, and we need to be aware of that. So I'll leave it there. I'll just say that we do need the engagement of the private sector. We do need the engagement of governments because we can't approach this by ourselves.
Well, great segue to the question to Karen. That would be, how do you think companies and the private sector can work with NGOs, local communities, associations, and civil society organizations to build these needed, long-lasting, and mutually beneficial relations? If you can give us like the bullets.
Yeah, thank you. This is the hot topic we've been talking about for ages, right? But more than ever, because of the urgency of the topic, we really do need collaboration. Our slogan today is shared prosperity. We're not going anywhere alone, and we do need a whole lot of actors together to build whatever we're dreaming. And we dream big, and we dream with our partners. And I'll give you 2 examples. One is in regenerative agriculture. We now have a public commitment, and here you are listening to it again, of having over 8,000 hectares of regenerative agriculture in our production. And we have an open invitation, open call on our website. So anyone who's planning nearby us or who wants to get in this together, let's learn together and improve this. Brazil and other countries in Latin America can gain so much with it because we already have sustainable practices in the field. We can learn together more and hopefully bring it to other regions. And on another topic, I would bring, the example we have of alliance of Guaraná de Maués. You know Guaraná, one of our most loved brands, and it's a fruit from the Amazon. So we're talking about 5,000 farmers together, 5,000 people being affected and impacted by good practices in terms of biodiversity practices, of agriculture, of cultural associations. We're talking about over 20 organizations and trading companies that we are part of it. We're together with them because that's how we learn and prosper together. It's happening, it's doing really well.
Brilliant, thanks so much. So we have had the perspective from the business sector, from the NGOs. I would like to invite now, I'm shifting to Spanish, quiero convidar a que se nos sume la perspectiva de los gobiernos. Entonces tenemos los tres sectores representados y quiero pedirle a Nelson Camilo, coordinador.
Represented, I want to ask Jesus Camilo, which is the General Director in the urban side, to talk about the perspective of the governments regarding this sector. Please, if you can sit down, and please a round of applause for Camilo. Well, thank you so much. Most of all to the Council of Climate Change to invite me to this space to share with you. From the local government perspective, I am part of the functions of the unit of evacuation of neighborhoods. That is a unit that is focused in the areas of informal settlements, where we develop different projects, a series of projects that mitigate, and they search for ways to control and to make the changes, the urban changes, resilient in as far as housing development, structures, and water, and as far as the parts where the rivers are developed. So it is important to point that we intervene in areas where the families live, the urbanizations live, the neighborhoods. The government is making an effort to integrate need that not only for urban development, but as health, education, and also human resources and social, because they involve with us for those urban development. They can create plans that help to control and develop the climate change and to make to have a development of sustainable projects. So it's important to observe that the cities, we have to look at them as a focus of opportunities where those changes that are done in the infrastructure, they change the life, they dignify all this and make these projects most of all because in the occasion is not expected, we have to create it. So a part of that is what we make in a positive way, impacting the communities, the organizations, the local organizations, along with all the parts. And that is clear that there is a holistic part in all this, that what we have to do, but in individual way, the institutions, the private organizations acting independently, we are not going to be able to accomplish anything. In fact, we have experience in the cleaning of the Osama River. We have a project with Domingo Savio, which is the recovering of the river, which is in the neighborhoods in La Ciénega and Los Guandules, where they have private organizations developing some very positive plans and sometimes decentralized from the government, but we are making a big effort to integrate all of that to make of that a development that is a resilient in that case. And so I think that with that, I give a general overview as I was asked and to summarize of what we are doing and what could be developed with all of us.
Muchísimas gracias, Nelson.
Thank you so much, Nelson, with a very key perspective. I think it's important to have the perspective of the places where Nelson is talking about is places where the people that are in the front of that is very more affected in the climate change and the resilience. They are affected as well as the urban areas and all the ambits in agriculture that we need to recover. And I want to finish mentioning Syria Patel, who says that those who are going to define if we were able to overcome the climate changes are going to be the empowered women. Thank you, Nelson, Monica, for being with us here. Well, I will give the microphone to Marcia so she introduce our last and distinguished speaker. Thank you so much, Gonzalo, and to the panelists. We are going to be able to listen the closing of the event. Could you see us?
We can hear you.
How do we? Ah, there. Could you hear us now? We don't hear you.
Well, first of all, I'm really sorry I'm not there in person. As you can see, that causes all sorts of technical challenges. Let me start by thanking my fellow champions, Gonzalo and Mahmoud. One of the beautiful things about this process is that because we're always partnering, I come from the UK, but Gonzalo his experience in Latin America, rooted in Chile, and Mahmoud in Africa and Egypt. I'm learning massively about the challenges and the needs for us to work on resilience around the world. And that's one of the reasons why our job is to support the Paris Agreement, and we decided that not enough attention is being paid to resilience. So we really worked hard last year, and we continue to work hard to raise up the importance of resilience and this kind of collaboration. And I want to thank Marcia for your leadership and all of the Latin American, Caribbean, Climate Week, and the Race to Resilience partners. But just a few reflections on this. I know it's rushed, but this great be more holistic, to see this as a development opportunity, not just a climate issue. The fact that there are opportunities, but that we have to be nuanced about where there's an investment opportunity and where we need different forms of finance. I love the input from Thomas about people wanting to develop in harmony with nature, but us having to work together to create the system. And as Monica said, this is systemic change, right? So it's been great to have businesses and community leaders and initiative leaders, and then Nelson at the end talking from perspective of government. And Monica's point that when people are engaged, at a community level, it leads to different outcomes. Samara said it as well. We have to involve the communities, then you get this local supply chain involvement. We're raising equity. We're thinking in a much more grown-up and sophisticated way rather than just one dimension. I love that we had Coca-Cola and AdBev on the panel, two of the world's biggest beverage companies, talking about the way they, at the center of a nexus between millions of smallholder farmers and millions of small vendors, have a role much bigger than making profitable drinks. And Karen, I love your 100% local, natural, inclusive initiative, those 8,000 hectares of regenerative agriculture. I think that sounds great systems leadership from one actor. It reminds me that resilience is about much more than efficiency. Right? In fact, you need more of that relational connectivity to build resilience. Finally, Raquel, at the beginning, I think really important that you keep reminding us that we need to be more sophisticated when we talk about finance for resilience, that a dollar does not equal a dollar. It depends where you are and what you're talking about. Sometimes you just need grant finance, which maybe needs to be that precious public finance. But in other areas of the business case, we need to make the business case and create the conditions to harness that pile of capital that's out there. And then finally, Mahmoud, your point that we always have to think more holistic, that we can't ignore the context, which is very different now in terms of these perfect storm of crisis, war, commodity prices, food, energy, inflation, and we have to have a bigger conversation about the multilateral mechanism for mobilizing finance. And then just to come back to the champion's work, this is why we are working to launch what we call the resilience breakthroughs by Sharm el-Sheikh to really put the focus on what needs to be done practically. Raquel was talking about mangroves. How many millions of hectares do we need to restore? How much finance from what sources is needed to drive that? We're seeing this kind of approach of clear shared targets and then all the different systems levers really working on mitigation. And we have to apply that same architecture to resilience. I think the complexity and the multidimensional nature of the conversation we've heard today reflects that need for systems change, and that way we can bring about transformational change when we collaborate in a radical way. So I want to thank all of you. Again, really sorry I'm not where we are. Thank you for sharing so many ideas and for helping me learn so much in such a short space of time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Nigel. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
muchas más